Billionaire. Claude discovers a poor black boy teaching his daughter under a tree on his own lawn. His first instinct: call the police. His next decision? It shocked everyone who knew him. This is the true story of how one moment of prejudice became one man's greatest lesson, and how a 14-year-old genius changed everything. Terry James woke to the sound of sirens and his grandmother's coughing. The walls of their two-bedroom apartment were so thin he could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door yelling at her boyfriend again. Could hear the bass from someone's car stereo 3 floors down. Could hear the city breathing its familiar rhythm of chaos and survival. He lay still for a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had grown larger over the past month, spreading like a brown archipelago across the cracked plaster. The coughing got worse. Terry threw off his blanket and padded across the cold linoleum to his grandmother's room. Sarah James sat propped up on pillows, her thin frame shaking with each spasm, one hand pressed to her chest, the other clutching a tissue already spotted with red. "Grandma?" Terry said quietly, sitting on the edge of her bed. He waited for the fit to pass, his jaw tight. They both knew what the blood meant. They both knew she needed to see a doctor, get her medication refilled, maybe even go to the hospital. They both knew none of that was going to happen. When she could finally speak, Sarah waved him away. "I'm fine, baby. Just a little cold. You go on and get yourself some breakfast before your jobs." Terry wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she wasn't fine, that nothing about their situation was fine. Instead, he nodded and went to the kitchen. He made toast from the bread that was only slightly stale, scrambled the last 2 eggs, split everything onto 2 plates. His grandmother would protest that he should eat it all, that he was a growing boy. He would insist she needed her strength. This was their morning ritual, this dance of sacrifice. He was 8 when his mother died. Cancer had eaten through her body so fast the doctors said there was nothing they could do by the time she finally went to the clinic. He remembered her smile, the way she sang while cooking dinner, how she'd quiz him on his spelling words and whoop with joy when he got them all right. He was 11 when his father died, crushed by machinery at the construction site where he worked off the books because no one would hire him with a record from 20 years ago. No insurance, no compensation, just a body bag and a social worker asking where Terry would go. Sarah had taken him in without hesitation, stretching her pension to cover 2 people instead of 1. But pensions don't grow and the cost of living does. 6 months ago, when she'd gotten too sick to work her part-time job at the laundromat, Terry had made a choice: school or survival. He chose survival. After breakfast, he grabbed the bus schedule and his notebook, the one luxury he allowed himself, 50 cents at the dollar store, and headed out. His first stop was always the public library, if he could spare the time before his afternoon job started. It opened at 9 and Ms. Chen, the librarian, unlocked the doors like she was opening the gates to another world. For Terry, she was. "Morning, Terry," she said as he slipped past her into the cool, quiet sanctuary. "Calculus section?" "Yes, ma'am. And maybe some chemistry after." She studied him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. "You should be in school." Terry had heard this before. From her, from concerned strangers, from the truancy officer who'd come around once before giving up. He gave her his standard answer: "Can't afford to just learn. Gotta eat." "Education is eating," Ms. Chen said softly. "It's feeding your future." "Future don't pay my grandmother's rent," Terry replied, but not unkindly. He appreciated that she cared. Most people didn't even see him. He settled into his usual corner with a college-level calculus textbook. The numbers and symbols made sense to him in a way that little else in his life did. They were clean, logical, they followed rules. If you understood the rules, you could solve anything. He'd taught himself algebra at 12, geometry at 13. Now at 14, he was working through differential equations and barely breaking a sweat. His mind absorbed information like a sponge, had always been that way. His mother used to call it a gift from God. His teachers, back when he'd had teachers, called it exceptional. The social workers called him at-risk youth, just another statistic. Another black boy from the projects likely to end up dead or in prison before he turned 25. Terry called it survival. If his mind was all he had, then he'd sharpen it until it could cut through any obstacle. By noon, he had to leave for his real work. Lawns to mow, groceries to bag at the corner store, cars to wash at the self-service station. His hands blistered, his back ached. but at night he'd have enough money to buy dinner and put a little toward the rent. Small victories. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Audrey Bracy woke in a bedroom bigger than Terry's entire apartment. Her bed was a canopy of soft pink fabric. Her walls were lined with bookshelves full of books. She'd tried to read but couldn't, her failures mocking her in leather binding. The morning light filtered through expensive curtains, soft and golden, turning everything into a carefully curated dream. She could hear her father downstairs, the rustle of his Wall Street Journal, the clink of his coffee cup against imported china. Claude Bracy, self-made billionaire, master of the universe. He'd started with nothing and built an empire. He expected excellence because he'd achieved it. Audrey was failing. She stared at her report card on the nightstand, the red marks like wounds across the page. Math D, English D+, Science F, History C. The private tutors her father hired spoke to her like she was stupid. Their patience thin and fake. They'd explain things once, maybe twice, then sigh heavily when she still didn't understand. Nobody seemed to realize that the letters swam on the page, that numbers flipped themselves around in her head, that her brain worked differently than everyone expected it to. She thought she was broken. Her father thought she wasn't trying hard enough. At breakfast, Claude looked up from his newspaper. "Your school called yesterday, Mrs. Pemberton. Says you're not completing assignments." Audrey pushed her scrambled eggs around her plate. "I'm trying. Trying isn't good enough. I've given you every advantage, the best school, the best tutors, everything money can buy. What's missing?" His voice wasn't cruel, just genuinely confused. He'd solved every problem in his life through hard work and determination. Why couldn't his daughter do the same? Audrey wanted to tell him that some problems couldn't be solved with money, that she felt stupid and small and utterly alone in their big house. But she didn't have the words. Her mother would have understood. Her mother had died when Audrey was 6. And sometimes Audrey could barely remember her face, just the feeling of being held, of being safe. "I'll do better," she whispered, the lie tasteless on her tongue. After her father left for the office, Audrey wandered through the empty mansion. The housekeeper was vacuuming somewhere upstairs. The cook was preparing dinner that Audrey would eat alone at the long dining table. She drifted outside to her favorite spot, the old oak tree at the edge of the property, its massive branches creating a canopy of green. She sat in its shade with a book she was supposed to read for English class, the words blurring together, her mind drifting. Beyond the fence, she could see the neighborhood her father called rough. Smaller houses, older cars, people walking instead of driving. She'd been told never to go near it, never to talk to anyone from there. But sitting in her golden cage, surrounded by everything and feeling nothing, she couldn't help but wonder what it was like to live in a world where not everything was already decided for you. Terry had worked a dozen different yards in wealthy neighborhoods, but the Bracy estate made all the others look modest. The lawn stretched like a green ocean, perfectly manicured hedges lined the property, and the house itself looked like something from a magazine about people who summered in the Hamptons. He'd gotten the job through a neighborhood employment program that placed at-risk youth in service positions, a phrase that made his skin crawl. He wasn't at risk. He was surviving. He pushed the industrial mower across the grass, his t-shirt already soaked with sweat despite the morning cool. The irony wasn't lost on him. Rich people had so much lawn they paid someone to take care of, grass they barely walked on, while back home his grandmother couldn't afford to see a doctor. The waste of it all made his jaw clench. That's when he saw her. A girl about his age, maybe younger, sitting under a massive oak tree with papers scattered around her like fallen leaves. She was crying, not the dramatic sobbing kind, but the quiet, defeated kind that was somehow worse. Her school uniform marked her as someone from Whitmore Academy, where tuition cost more than his grandmother made in a year. Keep walking, Terry told himself. Not your business. Rich girl problems aren't your problems. But then he saw the paper closest to him. Math homework, fractions. And even from 6 feet away, he could see she was doing it all wrong, taking the longest possible route to the answer, tying herself in knots. He couldn't help it. Numbers were his language. And watching someone struggle with something so simple was like watching someone try to unlock a door they were already standing inside. "You're doing it the hard way," he said before he could stop himself. The girl looked up startled, her face blotchy from crying. She had green eyes, he noticed, the color of new leaves. What Terry hesitated. This was stupid. She'd probably tell her parents some kid from the yard crew was bothering her. And he'd lose this, just be like he'd lost the last one. When the owner's son accused him of looking at him wrong, but he was already here, already talking. The fractions. You're trying to multiply them like whole numbers. That's why it's not working. He picked up a leaf from the ground, held it up. If this is one whole leaf and I tear it in half, what do I have 2 pieces, Audrey said, her voice small. Right. 2 pieces of one whole. That's all fractions are pieces of a whole. So when you multiply 1/2 by 1/4, you're asking what's 1/4 of a half. He tore the leaf again to demonstrate. Audrey stared at the leaf pieces in his hand and then something shifted in her face. Oh, it's just pieces of a whole. That's why oh my God, that makes so much sense. Her smile transformed her entire face. Genuine and bright and completely unguarded. Terry felt something unexpected satisfaction. He'd spent so much time learning alone, hoarding knowledge like a miser with coins, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to share it. Your tutors never explained it like that, he asked. My tutors explain it like I'm stupid, Audrey said, the smile fading. They use big words and get annoyed when I don't understand. Then my dad gets mad because he's paying them so much money. Terry sat down without meaning to, picked up her homework. You're not stupid. You just learn different. Here, let me show you another way. They talked for 20 minutes before Terry remembered he was supposed to be working. He scrambled to his feet, panic flooding through him. I have to the lawn, it's okay, Audrey said quickly. I won't tell. Will you come back to help me, I mean? Terry looked at her, this lonely rich girl in her expensive uniform, and saw something familiar in her eyes. The same hunger for connection he felt every day. Yeah, he said, I'll come back. The next week, Audrey was waiting by the oak tree before Terry even started the mower. She had homework spread out like an offering, her expression hopeful and nervous. Will you help me again? Please, I'll pay you. I have money. I don't want your money. Terry cut her off, his pride stinging at the suggestion. He didn't know why that bothered him so much. He needed money, desperately, but taking it from her felt wrong somehow, like he'd be just another employee, another person she paid to tolerate her. But he sat down anyway. It became their pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday when Terry worked at the estate, they'd meet under the oak tree. His teaching methods were nothing like her expensive tutors. He used sticks to demonstrate physics, told stories to make history memorable, drew pictures in the dirt to explain chemical bonds. He made her laugh while learning, challenged her without making her feel small. You're really smart, he told her one day, and meant it. You just need people to teach you in your language instead of theirs. Audrey's grades started improving. More than that, she started enjoying learning, something she'd never experienced. And gradually their sessions became less about homework and more about talking. She asked about his life with genuine curiosity, not the voyeuristic kind he'd experienced, from wealthy people who treated poverty like a zoo exhibit. He was guarded at first, but she was patient. Eventually, he told her about his grandmother, about teaching himself from library books, about the impossible choice between education and survival. But why can't you just go to school, Audrey asked, her privilege showing in the innocent confusion. School is free. School costs time, Terry explained, his voice gentle because he knew she didn't understand. Time I spend in a classroom is time I'm not earning money. And money keeps my grandma alive, pays rent, buys medicine she needs. Free doesn't mean free when you got nothing. He watched her face as she processed this, saw her world view shifting. She'd been lonely in her big house, but she'd never been desperate. She started sneaking him food, from the kitchen sandwiches wrapped in expensive napkins, fruit that would have gone to waste anyway. He tried to refuse at first, but she looked so hurt that he relented. Don't tell your father, Terry said one day, sudden anxiety gripping him. About me helping you. People like your dad, they don't see people like me as anything but trouble. My dad's not like that, Audrey protested, defensive. Terry gave her a sad smile, older than his 14 years. They all are Audrey. It's okay. I'm used to it. I'm just the kid who mows your lawn. That's all I'm supposed to be. But even as he said it, something in him hoped. Hoped that maybe this time it would be different. That maybe this girl with her green eyes and her genuine kindness represented something beyond the walls that divided their worlds. Audrey started questioning things she'd never questioned before. Why did some kids have everything while others had nothing? Why did her expensive school have Olympic-sized pools while Terry's old school couldn't afford working heat? She brought these questions to dinner, to her teachers, made them uncomfortable with her newfound awareness. And Terry, who'd spent so long building walls around his heart, found them crumbling under the oak tree, found himself teaching not just math and science but sharing pieces of himself he'd kept locked away. They were changing each other. These two kids from opposite worlds, meeting in the shade of an old tree that didn't care about wealth or poverty, only about the roots that ran deep beneath the surface where everyone was equal. The report card arrived on a Thursday, and Claude Bracy stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. Straight B's, 2 A's in math and science. His daughter, who 6 weeks ago had been failing everything, was suddenly thriving. He called Whitmore Academy immediately. Mrs. Pemberton, the headmistress, was effusive. "Mr. Bracy, I must say, whatever you've done has worked wonders. Audrey's participation in class is exceptional. Her understanding is deep, not just memorization. She's asking sophisticated questions, helping other students. It's remarkable." "What about her tutors?" Claude asked. "Well, they seem somewhat confused, to be honest. They're claiming credit, naturally, but they can't quite explain the transformation." After he hung up, Claude found Audrey in the kitchen, making herself a sandwich. "Your report card came." She looked up, something guarded in her expression. "Oh, Audrey, what changed? Tell me the truth." "I just started understanding," she said, not meeting his eyes. Things clicked. Claude studied his daughter. He'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing when someone was hiding something. She was hiding something, but she was also happy, more engaged with life than he'd seen her since her mother died. He decided to let it go for now. Meanwhile, across the city, Terry sat in the emergency room holding his grandmother's hand. Sarah's breathing was labored, her skin ashen. The doctor used words like pneumonia and dangerously, high blood pressure and needs to be admitted, but all Terry heard was the price tag attached to keeping her alive. He took extra shifts everywhere he could find them. The grocery store, the car wash. He even unloaded trucks at the warehouse at 5 in the morning before his other jobs. He missed a week at the Bracy estate, too exhausted to make it across town, too afraid to leave his grandmother alone for that long. Audrey waited by the oak tree every Tuesday and Friday, her homework untouched beside her, watching the driveway. But Terry never came. She didn't know his last name, didn't know where he lived, had no way to reach him. The not knowing was worse than anything, her imagination conjuring terrible scenarios. When Terry finally returned the following Tuesday, he looked like he'd aged a year and 7 days. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped with a weight that had nothing to do with the mower he was pushing. Audrey ran to him before he'd even started the engine. "Where were you? I was so worried, I thought." And then Terry, who'd been holding everything together through sheer force of will, broke. "My grandma," he said, his voice cracking. "She's dying, Audrey. The doctors say she needs treatment we can't afford. Medicine that costs more than I make in 3 months. I can't save her." Audrey didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around him, held him while his body shook with silent sobs. It was the first real hug he'd had in years. The first time someone had held him like he mattered, like his pain was worth acknowledging. They ended up under the oak tree, sitting close, her head resting on his shoulder. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, dappling them in light and shadow. "You're my best friend," Audrey said softly. "My only real friend." Terry wiped his eyes, managed a small smile. "You're mine too, Audrey. You're the only good thing I got." Neither of them heard the Mercedes pull into the driveway. Neither noticed Claude Bracy getting out, loosening his tie after a short day at the office. He walked around the side of the house, intending to check on the pool maintenance, and stopped dead. His daughter, sitting intimately close to a black teenage boy, on his lawn, her head on the boy's shoulder, his arm around her. Every protective instinct exploded. Every unconscious bias he'd have sworn he didn't have came roaring to the surface. "Audrey, get away from him." Claude's voice cracked like thunder across the lawn. Audrey jerked up, startled. Terry was on his feet instantly, hands raised, body tensed. Claude marched across the grass, fury and fear warring in his chest. "Who the hell are you? What are you doing with my daughter?" "I'm not doing anything wrong," Sir Terry said, his voice steady despite the panic in his eyes. "I know your type," Claude started, and hated himself even as the words left his mouth. "Stop it, Dad." Audrey stepped between them, and Claude had never seen such fierce defiance in her face. "This is Terry. He's my friend. He's my teacher." Teacher, Claude's voice dripped skepticism. "Audrey, he's the reason I'm not failing anymore. He's brilliant. He's been teaching me for weeks. And he's better than any tutor you've ever hired. Terry's laugh was bitter. It's okay, Audrey. He thinks I'm here to steal something or hurt you. I get it. I didn't say. Claude began, defensive. You didn't have to, sir. Terry's eyes met Claude's, and there was such exhausted resignation there. I know what you're thinking. Same thing everyone thinks when they see me. It's fine. I'm used to it. The silence that followed was painful, electric with tension and unspoken accusations. Audrey was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. Dad, please. Just listen. Just watch. She picked up her calculus homework. Work Claude hadn't even known she was doing. Terry, will you help me with this problem? You're studying calculus. Claude's voice came out strangled. Terry looked at Audrey, then at Claude, then back at Audrey. Slowly he sat down. Claude, still standing, watched. Terry walked Audrey through a problem on derivatives that Claude himself only vaguely remembered from his own college days. His explanation was elegant, intuitive, using pebbles to demonstrate limits and sticks to show the slope of a curve. He made complex mathematics seem simple, accessible, even beautiful. Audrey followed along, asked intelligent questions, solved the final part herself. Claude found himself sitting on the grass, stunned. How he started, his voice rough. How do you know this library? Mostly, Terry said, guarded again. I read. I remember things. Where do you go to school? Nowhere. Dropped out 6 months ago. Why would you? Claude stopped himself. Really looked at the boy in front of him. Worn shoes. Goodwill clothes. The exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. Why the question hung in the air. Terry's jaw worked, his hands clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because my grandmother is dying and I'm the only one who can take care of her. Because school takes time and time costs money and without money she dies. Because I had to choose between my education and her life. And that's not really a choice at all. Everything Claude had assumed about this boy. About poverty, about the world shattered. He'd pulled himself up from nothing, or so he'd always told himself. But he'd never had to choose between learning and survival. He'd never had to measure his grandmother's life in hourly wages. He looked at his daughter, seeing her clearly for the first time in months. She wasn't just getting better grades. She was happier, more confident, more aware. Because of this boy, this brilliant, desperate, invisible boy who'd stumbled into their lives and changed everything. Claude spoke quietly, his voice stripped of its usual authority. Take me to her. To your grandmother. Terry stared at him, confused. Why? Because I need to understand. The drive across the city was silent except for the hum of the Mercedes engine. Audrey had insisted on coming, sitting in the back seat, watching the neighborhoods transform outside her window. Gleaming high-rises gave way to modest homes, which gave way to aging apartment complexes with bars on the windows. Terry's shame grew with each mile, his hands clenched in his lap. This is where I live, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Claude parked and immediately people stared. A Mercedes in the projects was either police or trouble, and nobody wanted either. They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The concrete steps cracked and stained, the stairwell smelling of old cooking oil and desperation. Inside apartment 3C, the contrast was startling. The space was tiny, worn, but spotlessly clean. Every surface was scrubbed, every corner organized with the desperate dignity of people who had nothing but their pride. Photos lined one wall. Terry's parents, young and smiling, frozen in a happiness that had ended too soon. His elementary school certificates. A library card displayed like a diploma. Sarah James sat in a worn armchair, a blanket across her lap despite the summer heat coughing into a tissue. She looked up as they entered, shock and confusion crossing her weathered face. Terry, who? Grandma, this is Mr. Bracy. I've been helping his daughter. Terry's voice was tight, defensive. Sarah tried to stand. Claude stopped her with a gentle gesture. Please, Mrs. James, stay seated. He pulled over a kitchen chair, sat across from her like they were equals, which in this moment they were. Sarah told their story and Claude listened. Really listened. She spoke of losing her daughter to cancer, her son-in-law to an industrial accident, taking in Terry despite barely surviving on her pension. She spoke of his brilliance, how his teachers had called him exceptional, gifted, 1 in a million. How she'd had to choose between her medication and his education, between her life and his future. He deserves so much more, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Grandma, stop, Terry said, fighting tears. Claude leaned forward. Mrs. James, your grandson has a photographic memory. He's teaching himself college-level material from library books. He's teaching my daughter calculus. I know, Sarah said softly. His teachers used to say he could do anything. He still can, Claude said. The room fell silent. Claude looked at Terry, this brilliant boy who'd been invisible to people like him, and asked the question that would change everything. What do you want? If you could have anything. Terry's walls went up immediately. What does it matter? It matters, tell me. Something in Claude's voice, the genuine care. The respect broke through Terry's defenses. I want my grandma to live, he said, his voice cracking. I want to learn. I want to matter. Claude felt something shift in his chest. A recognition of his own privilege, his own blindness. You already matter, Terry, and I'm going to prove it to you. The next day, Claude returned alone, bringing an entourage that made Terry's stomach drop: a lawyer, a doctor, a financial advisor. Sarah's medical bills, all of them paid in full. Her ongoing treatment covered. Her medication guaranteed forever. Terry stood against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Why are you doing this? Because I was wrong about you. Because you've given my daughter something I never could: confidence, understanding, friendship. Because you deserve a chance. So this is charity, Terry said bitterly. No, this is justice. The world failed you. I'm trying to correct that. Claude paused. I want to enroll you at Whitmore Academy, same school as Audrey. Terry's laugh was sharp, disbelieving. That school costs $50,000 a year. I know, I can't pay that back. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be brilliant. That's payment enough. Terry's carefully constructed walls crumbled. Why me? Claude's voice was gentle. Because you saw my daughter when everyone else just saw her struggles. Because you gave freely when you had nothing. Because you matter, Terry, you always have. 2 weeks later, Claude stood at a country club dinner, addressing his social circle, the wealthy elite who controlled boardrooms and made decisions that shaped the city. He announced Terry's enrollment at Whitmore, and the room erupted in gasps and whispers. Claude, surely you're not serious, one board member said, his tone dripping with thinly veiled racism. This boy is smarter than anyone in this room, Claude interrupted, his voice steel. This boy taught my daughter what your expensive tutors couldn't. But the other families will deal with it, or withdraw their children. I don't care. Claude looked around the room, meeting every eye. This is what we're doing. And if you have a problem with it, you know where the door is. Some people stood and applauded. Others stared coldly. Claude didn't flinch. Terry's first day at Whitmore was baptism by fire. The blazer felt strange on his shoulders, the tie like a noose. Students stared, whispered. Some were openly hostile. Others just curious, treating him like an exotic animal. Audrey met him at the entrance, took his hand. Ready? Not really. Me neither. Let's go anyway. In advanced mathematics, the teacher was initially dismissive of the new scholarship student, until Terry solved a problem on the board that had stumped the entire class. His explanation so clear and elegant that even the teacher stood silent, reevaluating everything. Weeks turned into months. Terry excelled, made the honor roll, started a free tutoring program for struggling students. Slowly, he became known not as the charity case but as the genius. Then simply as Terry, a person, not a symbol. 6 months later, Sarah sat in Whitmore's auditorium, healthy and radiant, watching her grandson inducted into the National Honor Society. Terry's speech was short but powerful. He thanked Miss Chen, his grandmother, and a man who chose to see me, not his assumptions. He looked directly at Claude. You gave me a chance when the world told you not to. You taught me that worth isn't determined by where you come from. After the ceremony, they gathered under the oak tree, Claude, Audrey, Terry, and Sarah. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold. I'm proud of you, son, Claude said. Terry froze at the word son. Claude noticed. Too much. No, Terry said, tears streaming freely now. It's perfect. Does this mean Terry's my brother now? Audrey asked, grinning. Claude laughed. If he wants to be. Yeah, Terry said, his voice steady despite the tears. Yeah, I do. 5 years later, Terry stood as valedictorian at Whitmore's graduation, a full scholarship to MIT in his pocket. But he came home every break, still tutored students, now as a paid instructor. He and Claude had started the Oak Tree Initiative, providing educational access for brilliant low-income students across the city. Claude spoke at the graduation. 5 years ago, I almost made the worst mistake of my life. I almost let prejudice blind me to brilliance. Thank God my daughter was braver than me. He paused, looking at Terry. Terry taught me that privilege isn't
Just about what you...
have, it's about what you do with it. And the most unthinkable thing isn't giving someone a chance. It's refusing to see their worth in the first place. Years later, if you visited the old oak tree on the Bracy estate, you'd find something carved into its trunk, TJ plus AB, where everything changed. The tree still stands, a silent witness to the day two worlds collided and created something neither could have imagined alone, a family built not on blood or circumstance, but on the radical act of seeing someone's true worth. Thank you, Echoes of Love family. Your support means everything. I see you. I appreciate you. I love having you on this journey.